Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 1 of the Bowler's Den podcast. I'm your host, Toby LaGrange, and this episode is entitled The Ugly U-Word. Of course, the U-word I'm referring to is urethane, and we're going to get into my thoughts on the whole urethane USBC controversy that's been sprouting up here over the last couple of months. I know I'm a little late to the game, but I wanted to wait to launch this podcast closer to the bowling season, and of course, this is the big discussion that's been happening in the bowling world in the quote-unquote off-season, that is the summertime. But enough talk. Let's get right into episode number 1 of the Bowler's Den, The Ugly U-Word. Let's dive right into the first part of the Bowler's Den podcast here on episode number 1, The Ugly U-Word, urethane, and the USBC. I'm going to read you exactly what the USBC posted on the topic a couple months back, and then I'll give my opinion as we go along. Over the past several months, USBC has conducted research, engaged a third-party working group of technical experts and key stakeholders, and held a formal comment period with bowling ball manufacturers to address concerns about urethane bowling balls and their impact on competition. Here are the USBC's concerns. And again, I'm going to comment after each one. First up, lane pattern integrity. They say that urethane bowling balls can alter lane patterns more quickly, disrupting intended lane pattern design and creating imbalances between different styles of players. But isn't that part of bowling? You have players who play different ways and they create different lane conditions going forward. You need to learn to adjust. At least that's what I was always taught. I know I took 20 years off from bowling and came back last year, and the bowling world's completely different, and I'll get more into that in a different podcast. But come on. Even back then, everybody threw different. It did different things to the lanes. I know it's exaggerated more now because the balls are more powerful, and that's a different topic for another day as well. But you really just need to learn to bowl what you got. And this is what really drives me nuts about modern bowling. But again, that's a different topic. You learn to adjust. It's part of bowling. And, changing conditions is kind of like in racing. Track changes as the race goes on. You adjust or you go to the back. In baseball and football, the field conditions change. If it's sunny, it gets drier. If it's wet, it gets slipperier, or it gets tackier in racing, that type of thing. It always changes. You have to always adjust. In football, if it gets wetter, you put bigger cleats on, and you adjust your game. Maybe you run more than you pass. It's just like the same thing in bowling. It's the same thing in bowling, You have to adjust to the changes of the lane conditions that are going on. That's common sense. And if urethane balls change it more, okay, you adjust more. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just too simple. I'm more of a common sense person. So let's go on to the next part. Competitive fairness. When urethane and reactive equipment are both used in the same competitive environment, it causes competitive imbalances between different styles of bowlers. Okay, so then adjust your style. If you have a two-hander throwing oil around, or if you have somebody who throws a plastic ball down, what's the big deal? Everybody's bowling on the same conditions. If it changes, you have to adjust. It goes back to the first part. I understand I'm making this more of a more simple than it needs to be in a lot of people's minds, but it really is that simple. Learn to adjust. Next part. Player development concerns. Increasing reliance on urethane may reduce player versatility and hinder long-term skill development, particularly among younger and developing athletes. Really? Hurting development? Urethane's hurting development, but the kid who has 10 bowling balls with him sitting on the other side of the aisle for his junior league, or 5 bowling balls with him at a tournament, isn't? The $1,000 in equipment he brings to every match or every tournament is helping him, but one urethane ball is not. One urethane ball going down the lane is not. He has all these reactive balls to choose from, and he's not learning to develop, he or she, I should say. This one really gets to me, some really sticks to my craw, if you will. USBC, in my opinion, does not care about developing skill. If they did, they would A, ban two-handers, and B, they would require only one ball per tournament, one ball in use on a weekly leagues, just one, not a main ball and a spare ball, not 2 balls and a spare ball, not 5 balls and a spare ball, but one ball. That would develop skill. You shoot the spares with the ball you have, like they did for many, many years. No spare balls. I do use a spare ball, and I bring 3 total balls to league, 2 reactive and a spare. But there were times when I used urethane and a spare ball. I wouldn't be objected. I wouldn't object if They truly, truly wanted to develop skill to just saying, okay, one ball. That solves all. One ball. If you want to bring urethane, fine. You want to bring plastic, fine. I'll tell you, I bowled some nice 200 games, 200 plus games with my plastic spare ball. Why? Just learn to throw it. Throw it straighter. Don't try to hook it, although mine does hook a little bit. Don't try and hook it. Throw it straighter, and boom, now you got a plastic ball for your spare ball. One ball is all you need. If they really wanted to help with the development of players, they would make them learn correctly and not learn how to just change balls. That maybe I'm not saying it right, and maybe I'm not prepared enough for this podcast to talk about it like that. But the bottom line is, they're really not concerned, in my opinion, about development. There's a deeper thought to this, and I'll get to that later on. Get rid of reactive. I've said this for a long time. You don't need reactive. If they really wanted to develop players, they would get rid of reactive. Of course, the bowling ball companies wouldn't like that, but get rid of reactive and just go with plastic. Everybody throws plastic. Everybody throws plastic or maybe urethane. Done deal. No reactive. You have 2 total balls. Although, like I said, one would be the best. But a plastic and a urethane, and you're done. USBC would never do that. The next one and the final one. Governance and integrity challenges. Urethane balls can measure softer over time, making it difficult to distinguish between natural aging and tampering. These issues have continued to contributed to protest and confusion at events, creating enforcement challenges and questions around competitive integrity. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that what we pay the USBC for? We pay our membership dues. We pay to enter these tournaments. You're supposed to figure out the competition and make it fair. And banning balls is not that. You can do random tests. You can, go through with a protest, make it harder to protest, make it easier to protest, whatever you think is right. And of course, hand out harsher penalties for those who are found cheating up the balls, cheating up the urethane balls, making them softer, whatever they're doing. Punish them harder. Kick them out of the USBC. Kick them out of bowling for a year or two. That'll end a lot of it. But yes, you definitely have to govern it more. But there's ways around that other than just banning the bowling balls. Now, they're not going to ban the bowling balls. They're not going to ban urethane. I'll get into that in a moment. But further making the rules harder without actually enforcing what you have really isn't going to be the answer either. USBC's next step includes continuing to evaluate this matter by considering both previously received feedback and any additional input moving forward. All stakeholder feedback and ongoing research will be presented to the Equipment Specifications Committee at its next scheduled meeting in late August or early September. Well, guess what? It's early September, so waiting for those any day now. With that being said, the USBC has already come out and said that they are not looking at totally banning urethane bowling balls. They're not looking to ban it from your league, which was the fear. And that's one of the reasons why they're not going to ban it, because then they have to tell all the league bowlers who might only have a urethane bowling ball and can't afford to go out and buy a resin ball that they have to get rid of the ball or not bowl in a USBC league. Well, it's not so much for the players as they're concerned. They're concerned about the players not bowling USBC leagues and going to bowl in an independent league. That's all what it's all about. It's all about the dollar, and we all know that. My take on this: the bowling ball companies put pressure on USBC to do something because they're not making enough money on urethane bowling balls, and it's common business sense. If you have just a few urethane balls that might not have the biggest margins in terms of sales and numbers, but you have these resin balls that are coming out by the droves. I mean, bowling ball companies are sending out tons of bowling balls every year. That's, again, another episode of the podcast. Of course they're making more money over here than they are over here. And you cannot tell me that the bowling ball companies, Storm, Motive, or Brunswick, did not put pressure on USBC to do something. Make it so. I'm sure they wanted the not the reactive balls. Excuse me. They wanted the urethane balls to be booted out of competition, at least on the PBA level or the higher USBC tournaments. Hopefully that doesn't happen. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen. I don't know. I know I'm rambling a little bit here. I'm just trying something new. Normally on my podcast, I read from a script. Today I'm doing one off the cuff with just a few notes. and that's the way I'm going to do this podcast. So bear with me as we get better at this here on the Bowlers Den, but we'll be back with you. I'm going to shoot for every week here during the season. It might be every couple weeks, depending on what I got going on here. Still a lot of racing responsibilities and announcing, and my Toby the Grain Show podcast, which I want to go deeper into as this off season comes on with in the racing world. I might even start a Syracuse Orange, podcast. Yeah, to me, it's still the Syracuse Orangeman, but I know they're Syracuse Orange. They've been the Orange for a long time. Anyway, that's enough of rambling about my other podcast and what's going on. That's the first episode of the Bowlers Den. Stay tuned for my league review from our practice night. That'll be coming up here next. Like I said, as soon as the PBA kicks off, I'll be doing some power rankings for the PBA Tour. We don't have a schedule on the PBA Tour yet, although listening to some podcasts or reading some articles, it's probably not going to kick off until probably February. I remember when it kicked off in October, September. But, that's another podcast as well. Thanks for listening to this portion of the Bowlers Den. Let's go into my league review.
Hey everybody, Toby here with my first league review of the season. This year I switched over to Wednesday nights at the Arterial Lanes in the Hump Day Hellers League, leaving the Space League on Tuesday night. Tuesday nights are just too tough for me. Got a lot of things going on Tuesdays, so Wednesday fits perfect. Tonight was practice night, and 220 and a 170 in practice, so it wasn't too bad. Gearing up for the first real week next week. Big thank you to everybody here on the Hump Day Hellers League for letting me come and join their league. I think I'm going to have some fun this year, and that's what it's all about. Like I said, 220 and 170 tonight. Lanes, weren't bad for just practice week. And, if I could just make some spares, that 170 would have been in the 200s. That 220 would have been probably 240 or 250. But, whatever. It's practice week, and we'll move on. Start my first full season with my two new bowling balls, my Black Widow Mania and my Scorpion Strike. Big shout outs to Matt Fazzone and everybody at Revolutions Pro Shop for hooking me up with those balls. They were, they're great balls. They're drilled perfectly. I love them, and it's brought some fun back to bowling. So thank you very much, Matt. Thank you very much, Matt, and everyone at Revolutions Pro Shop. I went to the one at Boulevard Bowl in Schenectady, but they have two other locations as well. So look them up online for all your bowling ball and bowling equipment needs. Next week, like I said, we start for real here at Arterial Lanes, and I'm looking forward to it. And you'll have another league review next week right here on the Bowlers Den.